At least 23 casualties and 70 injured resulted from a subway bridge collapse in Mexico. In Spain, voters are forming queues at polling stations during the regional elections in Madrid. Foreign ministers and representatives from the Group of Seven, G7, kicked off a two-day meeting to address global challenges. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. On Tuesday, a bridge in Mexico City's subway collapsed, causing at least 23 deaths. According to the authorities, 70 people were injured. Rescue efforts continue by searching survivors that might be trapped. Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum said she didn't know if the people trapped inside the car were alive. The accident happened on the subway line 12, which construction has been plagued by complaints of irregularities. Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard described the event on his Twitter account as a terrible tragedy. During a press conference following the metro accident, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador promised a full investigation involving international experts.
A thorough investigation will be carried out without overlooking anything in order to know the truth. I put myself at the disposal of the authorities in all that is necessary to clarify and to determine the responsibilities that may arise. Here I am at your disposal, as always. When you establish what happened with verified evidence, you can establish who is responsible for it. It is the most terrible accident we have ever had in the public transportation system.
Colombia has seen widespread protests and popular outcry against the neoliberal package of measures promoted by President Iván Duque, which includes a series of detrimental reforms to education, health, and the salaries of the most vulnerable sectors of the country. Our correspondent, Hernán Tovar, has the story.
To be the stage for marches and protests, and despite the withdrawal of the tax reform bill that triggered the demonstrations, the demands of different social sectors continue to grow in the face of increased repression and the accumulation of unattended needs that have resulted in high rates of poverty and unemployment.
I am a victim of this system because I have been working for 7 years and I don't have a single peso because I had to spend it all paying for my college loans. In addition to that, today I am unemployed and I am not only marching for myself, I am marching for my siblings who are younger than me and who are going to face very difficult conditions.
Within the framework of these demonstrations, there have been denunciations by human rights organizations and social movements regarding the increasing abuses of state security forces, including attacks with firearms and arbitrary detentions. According to the NGO Temblores, between April 28th and May 1st, there were 92 cases of physical violence, 21 victims of murderous violence by the police, 672 arbitrary detentions, 4 victims of sexual violence by the public forces, figures that may continue to increase since the repression does not cease.
The police and the anti-riot squadron are there to protect their people and their citizens, and not to be against them. Remember that, Mr. Policeman. Remember that, Mr. Smat. You are also part of the citizenship, and please honor the oath that you took, pledging in all of your hymns and when you became a police officer, to protect the population and citizens, not to murder or rape women.
And while students work to raise awareness in the midst of the marches, others joined the demands for the elimination of the health reform that is being studied in the Colombian Congress as a matter of urgency.
Basically, the patient is not prioritized as a human being, but as a commodity.
Added to this social discontent against the policies of the Duque administration, taxi drivers from all over the country are requesting the regulation of the use of digital transportation platforms, which they denounce are bankrupting them, for which they demand the resignation of the president.
There is a song that goes, Duque chao, Duque chao, Duque chao. Here we don't want Duque anymore. Duque, you are a complete dirtbag, because you are selling us out, you are nailing us, you are killing us. You have to fulfill your campaign promises. They are not just words.
Various sectors involved in these demonstrations claim that marches and mobilizations will continue against the militarization of the cities, which give a warlike nature to the protest, for the elimination of the health reform, for the dismantling of the anti-riot squadron, for mass vaccination, among other proposals. A new day of protest is called for this Wednesday, with the participation of the different social platforms and the workers' federations.
Hernán Darío Tobar, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
The European Union condemned on Tuesday the violence of Colombian security forces against demonstrators and called for those responsible for the repression to be brought to justice. European External Action Service spokesperson Peter Stano rejected the acts of violence which target the legitimate rights to demonstrate, freedom of assembly and expression, and also stressed that it's very important that these rights are respected. Stano called for an end to the escalating violence and expressed the U.S. confidence in Colombian institutions to investigate and bring to jail those responsible for any abuse and violation of human rights. This Monday, members of the National Strike Committee in Colombia offered a press conference announcing their demands to the administration of President Iván Duque.
The announcement of the withdrawal of the tax reform bill as a triumph of the millions of Colombians who have mobilized and the majority support that citizens gave to the national strike. This happens after 6 days of national strike action, where civilian, military, and police authorities have daily restricted the freedoms and democratic guarantees of the people's right to social protest, leaving dozens of people killed, hundreds wounded and arrested. The government has had the opportunity to address and resolve the demands of the major mobilizations carried out since January 21, 2019, and the unfulfilled agreements with the people and their organizations, but it has never been willing to set up a table for negotiations and consensus.
During a presidential debate ahead of Peru's June the 6th runoff election, candidate, school teacher and trade unionist Pedro Castillo vowed to draft a new constitution and review contracts with transnational companies that he stressed have plundered the country.
For a national referendum to install a national constituent assembly, to develop a new constitution where a government of the people will make health a constitutional right. Let us review the transnational contracts, the contracts that have been signed with the transnational companies that have plundered the country, so that today, when they are stealing the country's wealth, 70% of it is taken there, 70% should stay in Peru.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. The polling stations opened this Tuesday in the elections in Madrid, which in addition to deciding the new government of this region, are seen as a key election for the whole of politics in Spain. The polls opened at 9 a.m. local time until 8 p.m., with just over 5 million voters called to participate in atypical elections, as they are held on a working day when the usual in the country is on Sunday and with biosecurity measures in the face of the pandemic of COVID-19. According to local media, the ballot casting day is developing normally, without incidents, although with large queues at the polling stations and waiting time lines longer than usual, not only due to the COVID protocol, but also to work permits, as many workers had to go early in the morning. As part of the COVID-19 guidelines, polling stations are cleaned every 3 hours. The voters use separate entrance and exit circuits to minimize contacts as much as possible. Given the preliminary counts, the turnout is expected to exceed the one of 2019 elections. And the main contestants in Madrid's regional elections voted. Isabel Díaz Ayuso, the right-wing incumbent leader of Madrid and representative of the Conservative Popular Party, voted during the regional polls. Ayuso has avoided tight COVID-19 restrictions on behalf of the economy in the Spanish capital. For his part, the veteran politician and contestant for the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, Ángel Gabilondo, also cast his vote during the regional elections after having the support of Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez during his campaign. Gabilondo runs for the second time after he failed to secure Madrid's leadership in 2015 elections. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez also voted. And India crossed the 20 million mark on Tuesday during a second wave of COVID-19 cases that has collapsed the healthcare system, pushed for new restrictions and prompted calls for the opposition for a total confinement of the population. The country recorded about 357,000 new infections on Tuesday, according to the latest data from the Indian Health Ministry, bringing the total number of cases since the start of the pandemic to 20.2 million. India also counted around 3,400 deaths in 24 hours, bringing the total number of deaths to over 222,000, although experts warned that the official data underestimated the real situation of the crisis. India has administered 158 million vaccine doses so far, although the pace has slowed down, and in the last 24 hours, the country vaccinated 1.7 million people.
The government has to at least arrange for a proper oxygen supply in all the hospitals. Nobody should be dying because oxygen has run out. If patients get a proper oxygen supply, at least we can treat them and prevent death. Everybody is facing some problem or the other. For us, auto rickshaw drivers, if we don't take passengers or work, then we are in trouble, and if we take passengers, then we are also at risk.
In Greece, restaurants and cafes reopened the terraces on Monday after 6 months of pandemic shutdown. The Greek government has accelerated its vaccination campaign in the last few days, allowing people in their 30s to be vaccinated. More than 3 million vaccinations have been administered so far.
That will do better than last year. Many people have already been vaccinated, and more are to follow. So Greece is going to be a clean country.
It seems weird to me. I still can't realize that I am outside, relaxed and without a mask. We will see how it goes, because last time we opened, we were also optimistic about it, and afterwards they closed us down for 6 months.
The European Union's executive branch proposed on Monday to ease restrictions on travel into the 27-member bloc as vaccination campaigns continue to gather speed. Travel to the EU is currently extremely limited, except for a handful of countries with low infection rates.
Is proposing to ease restrictions on non-essential travel to the EU to take into account the progress of vaccination campaigns and developments in the epidemiological situation worldwide, while addressing variants through a new emergency brake mechanism. Among the main changes, we propose to allow entry to the EU for non-essential reasons, not only for all persons coming from countries with a good epidemiological situation, but also for all people who have received the last recommended dose of an EU-authorized vaccine. This could be extended to vaccines having completed the WHO emergency use listing process.
Saudi Arabian authorities have lifted travel restrictions for vaccinated people and those who have recovered from COVID-19 to travel abroad from May 17th. The Ministry of Interior said citizens who are fully vaccinated or those who have received the first dose of a vaccine at least 14 days before departure will be allowed to travel. Meanwhile, those who have been infected with COVID-19 must have recovered at least 6 months prior to their travel. Demand for foreign travel is expected to surge, especially with the summer holidays approaching, and some have welcomed the move as a means to boost the regional tourism industry. It is also thought the move could encourage more people to rush to have their jabs in order to be able to travel. However, experts have warned that unnecessary travel may expose people to infection and should be avoided. Yasuo Mori, Deputy Executive Director of Tokyo's 2020 Games Operations Bureau, explained some of the various restrictions planned for foreign athletes competing in the Olympic Marathon, which will be held in Japan's northern city of Sapporo. With only 2 months ahead of the scheduled date for the Games, Japan has imposed an emergency state for several prefectures, given the increase in COVID-19 infections, which provoked national outrage and demands to postpone or cancel the events.
They will each undergo PCR tests on departure from their country and a series of tests on arrival in Japan. In addition, they will be subjected to daily screening tests during their stay. Thus, the competition is organized under close surveillance. Foreign athletes will not use public transports, and in principle, they will not be meeting members of the public. Their movements will be under stringent regulations.
And we have more stories coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. On Tuesday, foreign ministers and representatives from the Group of Seven, the G7, kicked off a two-day face-to-face meeting to address global challenges that the bloc of wealthy nations believes threaten their democracies. Among the issues to be addressed will be relations with Russia, China and Iran, as well as the situation in Myanmar following last February's coup, the violence in Ethiopia and the war in Syria. The G7 ministers will also discuss the response to the COVID-19 health crisis and climate change, among other issues. At a joint press conference the day before, UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab and the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made it clear that Russia and China issues will occupy the bulk of the agenda, although both officials assured that neither Washington nor London wish to engage in direct confrontation with these powers. And negotiations to engage all parts of the Yemen conflict in peace talks are underway at the United Nations Security Council, according to the Lebanese television network Al Mayadeen. An international consensus is getting momentum to cancel Security Council Resolution 2216, which puts the blame for the conflict on one of the factions in the war, the northern Yemeni government led by the Islamic movement Ansar Allah. Saudi Arabia and its regional allies launched a deadly war against Yemen in March 2015, killing thousands and bringing about the world's worst humanitarian crisis, according to the United Nations. On Monday, the Supreme Constitutional Court of Syria announced the acceptance of 3 of the 51 applications to stand in the presidential elections, scheduled for May 26. The announcement marks the beginning of a new phase of the electoral process, which started on April 19th. Our correspondent, Hisham Wanos, has the details.
The Supreme Constitutional Court of Syria, in its initial ruling, authorized the candidacy of Bashar al-Assad, along with 2 others, to stand for president of the country in the upcoming elections. The other applications were denied because they did not meet the constitutional and legal requirements. Those whose applications have been denied have the right to file an appeal to the Supreme Constitutional Court within 3 days from Tuesday, May the 4th, and the current decision is preliminary and not final, and does not entitle the accepted applicants to start their election campaigns before announcing the final list after the appeals have been answered. After the end of the period of submitting and receiving responses to any appeals, the top judicial body will announce its final decision on the accepted candidates and set the date for the start of their election campaigns. Syrians inside and outside the country are called upon to fulfill their constitutional duty and right to elect the right person to lead them in the current circumstances of terrorist and economic war facing their homeland.
There are parties that try to discredit the democratic development of these elections and seek to undermine their holding. Yet the decision is down to Syrians themselves and will always be. And despite all the challenges, Syrians are determined to continue with this process and to participate and fulfill their duty and right to elect the right person who will represent their aspirations and be their partner in building the future of Syria. Citizens have the opportunity to choose among the approved candidates, and this represents a patriotic responsibility, a duty and a constitutional right that citizens must fulfill by participating in the voting on the date scheduled, to define the future of their country after long years of war. We are confident that these elections will be a real turning point in the history of Syria.
Meanwhile, the Western campaign to undermine the legitimacy of these elections continues. Syrians denounce the unacceptable interference in the country's internal affairs. They consider that the presidential elections constitute a political triumph that complements the victories of their national army in the fight against foreign terrorism and prove their determination to rebuild their country, define its future, and preserve its sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity.
Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have completed the withdrawal of military units from their shared border, following an armed conflict that broke out in late April. A spokesperson for the Kyrgyzstan Border Service said the situation was stable, without any registered incidents or exchanges of fire during the night. The Joint Commission, formed by representatives of the defense ministries of both countries, continues working to resolve the dispute. The feud surrounding the Galvani water facility, which each side considers as part of its territory, escalated on April 28th after clashes between residents of the two countries' border areas. The ensuing challenge left dozens of people dead and injured on both sides before a ceasefire was declared. The two countries agreed to withdraw troops and military equipment from the area. The Democratic Republic of Congo will replace civilian authorities with military administrations in two conflict-hit provinces for a month, the government said on Monday, announcing the details of a state of siege to address worsening bloodshed in the east of the country. A surge in attacks by armed militias and intercommunal violence along the country's border with Uganda have killed hundreds of people since the start of the year. Under the state of siege, which was declared last Friday, governors and provincial assemblies in the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri will be suspended for 30 days from Thursday, a government spokesperson announced. In their place, the government will install military governors and police vice-governors with wide-ranging powers. Violence has remained endemic in eastern DRC Congo since the official end of the civil war in 2003, but insecurity has soared in the past 2 years, fueling a humanitarian crisis. Six months since the outbreak of the conflict between the Ethiopian Armed Forces and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, more than 1.7 million children and adults have been displaced in the northern Ethiopian region. They are in need of urgent support, including access to food for malnourished children, as well as shelter, healthcare, mental health support, clean water and sanitation services.
Of 2020, there's been ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. The ongoing conflict is having a significant impact on families and their children. There is a lack of access to food and to water, as well as ongoing destruction of healthcare facilities and educational facilities. At the moment, the needs on the ground are huge, and what we're seeing is not enough funding to support the services that are required to reach children and their families. So a lot of the healthcare facilities in Tigray are not functioning at the moment. They've been damaged due to the conflict and have had a lot of stores and equipment looted. The lack of access to healthcare has a huge impact on children and mothers. Children at the very basic level are not able to receive their routine childhood immunisations, putting them at huge risk of infectious diseases and also increasing the risk of an outbreak within the region.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.